let's go to topic number two. You said a word that doesn't roll off my tongue, but it has to do with something as a service. What was it? Servitude? What was it? Say.
Well, I hope it's not servitude. It's it's servitization, and it doesn't roll off my tongue easier too. It comes from the entire manufacturing industry. Some call it product as a service. Some call it X as a service. Others call it servitization. It's the entire philosophy of saying, look, I've not sold Paul an asset. So I've not sold Paul a car. I've not sold him a battery, but I've sold him car as a service. I've sold him battery as a service, which changes my complete relationship with you, Paul. You're not someone who bought something from me. You're you're someone whom I serve constantly. It just creates absolute havoc with current business models.
Well, I'm in the research business, so I had to do a little research on this topic, and I learned that the first example of this was in the '60s. A company that ended up being bought by Rolls-Royce, so it's part of Rolls, called Bristol Sidley. They took their Viper aircraft engines and sold power by the hour. So instead of selling an entire aircraft engine to an aircraft manufacturer, they would sell it to as a service, and that way they could track the maintenance much better. And it was easier for the acquiring companies to afford it and pay for it over time.
Exactly. And now you start seeing the advantages of this exact example. The same company, because they did what they did, found out that there was a lot more sand entering the engines when you fly over the Middle East. They wouldn't have discovered that if they didn't have this business model. And based on that, they had to redesign their engines a little different for planes flying over the Middle East. Right? So these are the kind of advantages you have if you're going from just selling products to product as a service. But it also starts creating havoc with your balance sheet because suddenly you have not sold inventory. So the inventory is not off your balance sheet. That asset's still on your books. What does this do to your balance sheet? It could create havoc if you're not set up for this. But you also have revenue streams you could never dream of. Instead of selling goods now, you have annuity services because I've just sold Paul Gottsing an asset for the next 5 years. This could create wonders with your share price because share price is the net present value of future earnings. Everybody is looking for annuity revenues coming from a product heavy company.
I want to give you an example and see what you make of it. It's one I can relate to because my wonderful wife always wants me to change all our light bulbs to LED. When I go to the hardware store, I have sticker shock and I'm scared to spend all the money up front. And I found out that Philips has a deal with the Amsterdam Airport Schiphol where they've replaced every one of their light bulbs with LED, but it's servitization. So they didn't have to shell out all the money up front. Meanwhile, they have the advantages from day one, and Philips probably sold way more in total to the Amsterdam airport than they would have in just the straight buy it as a product model. Is that a good representation?
That's a great representation. And if we can now start seeing, if you take this example and say, how does it actually reflect back within the enterprise Philips? What suddenly happens
Right.
is, how Paul is using the bulb or how this airport's using the bulb. Now, your bulb, which was your product, suddenly became your way of knowing your client.
Because IoT and sensors and analytics are taken advantage of in this model.
But if you go back into the enterprise, you have two systems. You have one system called Product Lifecycle Management, PLM, which you use for engineering the bulb. And you have another system for knowing what Paul or the airport wants, and that's the CRM. That's the customer relationship management. Now, you tell me in this connected bulb, which is telling you everything you need to know about the client, where does PLM stop and where does CRM start? Or is PLM our new CRM?
This sounds like a culture change or a mindset change to, what have you seen or what do you suggest, above and beyond just the concept, but just to make that push. That's a big change for any product organization to to walk that plank.
It's exactly. And I know we say culture eats strategy for breakfast. I'm not sure that's true. I think architecture does. So we could have all the culture change we need and mindset we need. But if your PLM system is doing PLM and your CRM system is doing CRM, you could have any amount of culture change. Your system's not supporting it. Guess what? You're doing what your system supports. So as we look at PLM programs, CRM programs, and we should come away from thinking in terms of silos and saying, how does my connected asset affect how I think about the client? For example, a lot of automotive firms at the moment don't know Paul and the vehicle ID in the same record. They know the ID of the car. They know the ID of Paul got seen. They don't have the link. They might not have the link. And the more you are hiding behind dealers, the less you have the link, which explains why everybody's trying to go to direct to customer models. So it's going to change the way you structure, the way you architect, the way you think digital threads through the enterprise, the way you think connected revenue models. If we start with these four things, then we can at least define what culture change should achieve. We talk about culture change, but we never talk about the end state of what culture change should achieve. I wish we spoke more about end state than about culture change.
Servitization is my new favorite word.